The day had been long and exhausting. After hours spent buried in case files and courtroom proceedings, the prosecutor finally felt a small sense of relief as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the quiet streets. Driving home alone, there was a comforting sense of normalcy, an ordinary moment that seemed to offer a chance to unwind and forget the stress of the office. The prosecutor's mind wandered over the events of the day, the evidence reviewed, the testimonies heard, and the strategies for upcoming cases. There was satisfaction in knowing that every decision made, every word spoken in court, had the potential to bring justice to someone who needed it. But as the car turned down a quiet street lined with old trees and dim streetlights, that feeling of security and normalcy was about to be shattered. Without warning, a police vehicle appeared behind, lights flashing and sirens silent. Confused and cautious, the prosecutor pulled over, instinctively placing hands on the steering wheel and rolling down the window. The officer approached quickly, his face tense and eyes narrowing, but there was no immediate explanation for the stop. The street, usually calm and unthreatening at this hour, suddenly felt hostile, and a sense of unease began to rise. The officer began speaking, but it quickly became clear that this was no routine traffic stop. The words were sharp, laced with an edge of aggression that made the prosecutor sit up straighter. The officer's tone carried something more than authority. It carried assumption and prejudice. Racially charged remarks slipped out, casual yet cutting, as if the prosecutor's presence alone justified suspicion. The words stung, an unexpected assault that the prosecutor had faced in different forms countless times before, but never in such an immediate and threatening way. Despite the fear that flared briefly, the prosecutor reminded themselves to stay calm. Panic could escalate the situation, and every action now required caution. Hands remained visible on the steering wheel, movements deliberate and controlled while the mind raced through possible strategies. The officer's aggression was rising, the stance rigid and confrontational, and the subtle hum of tension in the air was nearly unbearable. Then came the unimaginable. The officer reached for his weapon, pointing it directly at the prosecutor. The reality of the situation hit like ice water. Every instinct screamed to react, but the prosecutor knew that any sudden movement could turn a tense moment into a deadly one. It was a surreal experience, as if time had slowed, the world narrowing down to a single terrifying point, the barrel of a gun aimed at them. Bystanders, a few who happened to be walking along the street, stopped in their tracks, unsure of what to do. Their faces reflected a mixture of shock and fear. The prosecutor's mind worked rapidly, evaluating the environment, noting every exit, every possible risk. The officer's hands shook slightly, revealing tension beneath the controlled aggression, and the prosecutor realized that this was a fragile moment, balanced precariously on fear, prejudice, and misunderstanding. As the seconds stretched, the prosecutor's thoughts returned briefly to personal experiences with injustice, years of studying law, years of prosecuting criminals, and years of upholding the system of justice. All of that seemed distant compared to the immediate danger. Yet, it also reminded them of the skills honed over a career spent navigating high-pressure situations. Staying calm, thinking clearly, and controlling emotions could be the difference between life and death. The officer's words continued, sharp and insulting, revealing assumptions that were baseless yet deeply ingrained. The prosecutor responded only minimally, careful not to provoke further aggression. Every word, every movement was measured. The mind worked in overdrive, processing the officer's body language, tone, and intention. It was a delicate dance. One misstep could trigger a disaster, but so far the prosecutor had maintained a careful equilibrium. Time seemed to stretch as the confrontation continued. The shadows from the streetlights flickered across the pavement, and the quiet of the street was pierced only by the occasional rustle of leaves or distant car. The prosecutor noticed small details, the officer's shifting stance, the tightening grip on the gun, the subtle signs of human tension hidden beneath a uniform of authority. These observations, though small, were crucial. They offered insight into the officer's state of mind, a clue to how the situation might be diffused. The prosecutor's training kicked in. The ability to read situations and people became a guiding force. In their mind, they weighed options: speak, remain silent, slowly move, stay completely still. Each option carried risks, yet clarity of thought was the only tool available. Memories of colleagues in the justice system, mentors who had taught the importance of composure under pressure surfaced. The lessons of patience, observation, and strategy were now more valuable than ever. Minutes felt like hours. The street was still, the surrounding houses dark as if holding their breath. The officer's aggression began to waver slightly, a flicker of doubt crossing his eyes. Perhaps the intensity of the prosecutor's calm presence was affecting him, or maybe the realization that the situation was being carefully observed caused a shift. The balance of power, though outwardly skewed by the gun, was more complex than appearances suggested. Inside the car, the prosecutor maintained a composed exterior, but internally, adrenaline surged. Heart pounding, senses heightened, every sound amplified. The world narrowed to the immediate environment, the officer's actions, and the possible consequences. The mind cycled rapidly through possible responses, weighing the safest path while also considering the need for accountability. This was not just about survival. It was about maintaining dignity and asserting the principles that defined a career built on justice. The prosecutor's voice, when it finally spoke, was steady but firm. Careful words were chosen, designed to de-escalate while asserting control. The officer's eyes flickered with surprise at the calm authority in response to aggression. There was a momentary pause, a small crack in the tension, hinting at the possibility of turning the encounter away from danger. Even as the immediate threat loomed, the prosecutor's thoughts wandered briefly to broader realities. How many others had faced this type of prejudice? How many had been judged solely by the color of their skin, rather than their actions or character? The personal nature of the threat was undeniable, yet it was also a reflection of a larger societal issue, one that the prosecutor had confronted professionally but now experienced personally. Every second was critical. The officer's behavior, though increasingly erratic, was being documented mentally by the prosecutor. Every gesture, every word, would later serve as evidence should this encounter lead to formal proceedings. The prosecutor's career had been built on facts, on evidence, on careful observation, skills now being used in the most personal and immediate way possible. The street seemed endless, the shadows long as the standoff continued. The prosecutor maintained eye contact, a subtle signal of calm and awareness. There was a quiet determination, an unspoken assertion that while the officer had the physical advantage, the moral and intellectual advantage remained with the prosecutor. Courage, composure, and careful observation were tools as powerful as any weapon. Slowly, the initial shock began to subside, replaced by a focused clarity. The situation was still dangerous, but the prosecutor now felt a sense of control in how they navigated it. The officer, still tense and aggressive, had not yet realized the true identity of the person before him. This ignorance, dangerous as it was, also represented an opportunity, a chance to redirect the encounter without violence. The encounter on the quiet street would mark a defining moment. Every decision, every measured response had the potential to change the outcome. The prosecutor understood that survival required patience and strategy, not haste or fear. With calm determination, they prepared for the next stage of the confrontation, fully aware that the balance between danger and resolution hung on their ability to maintain composure under extreme pressure. The tense silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. The prosecutor remained in the car, hands carefully placed on the steering wheel, eyes steady on the officer who had pointed a gun moments before. The world outside the vehicle seemed to pause, the quiet street becoming a stage for a confrontation that was as much about identity and respect as it was about danger. Every breath, every subtle movement carried weight, and the prosecutor's mind worked furiously to navigate the unfolding situation. It became clear that the officer had no idea who they were dealing with. The prosecutor's mind drifted to their career, to the years of dedication that had built them into a figure of authority and justice. They had spent countless hours in courtrooms, standing before judges, juries, and criminals alike, presenting evidence and making arguments that shaped outcomes. Now, in this vulnerable moment, all of that experience was locked inside their thoughts, unseen and unacknowledged by the man with the gun. The officer's demeanor remained aggressive, fueled by assumptions and biases. The prosecutor could see the tension in his posture, the small tremor in his hands, the way his eyes darted occasionally to the side as if seeking validation for his actions. Each gesture, each glance told a story of someone unsure yet unwilling to show it openly. The prosecutor noted these details, understanding that perception often dictated action, and a misstep by either side could turn fear into tragedy. Memories of past cases surfaced in the prosecutor's mind. They remembered arguing against corruption, exposing lies and fighting for victims who had no voice. Each case had required patience, careful observation, and strategic thinking. These lessons were now being applied instinctively as the prosecutor navigated a real-life threat. The focus was clear: maintain composure, assess the situation, and find a way to turn the confrontation toward safety. Inside the car, the prosecutor remained silent, though internally their mind raced. They considered the officer's possible motivations, the reason behind the sudden aggression. Prejudice was evident, but there might also be fear, insecurity, or stress influencing the officer's behavior. Understanding these human elements was crucial. By identifying the underlying emotions, the prosecutor could tailor their response, carefully selecting words and actions that could diffuse tension rather than inflame it. The officer spoke again, the words laced with accusation and suspicion. The prosecutor's lips remained closed, choosing silence over confrontation. Sometimes restraint was the strongest form of communication, a silent assertion that the situation could be controlled without yielding to fear. Every sound, every movement outside the car seemed magnified, from the rustle of leaves to the distant hum of a passing vehicle. These small details were reminders that the world had not stopped, that life continued around them even as danger loomed. Slowly, the prosecutor began to prepare mentally for the next move. Revealing their identity could change everything, but timing was critical. It had to be done in a way that commanded respect without provoking retaliation. This delicate balance required not only courage, but a deep understanding of human behavior. The officer, unaware of the power dynamic that would soon shift, was vulnerable in his assumptions. The prosecutor considered the legal knowledge and authority they held, recognizing that it could become a tool to redirect the encounter toward safety. As they waited, the prosecutor's thoughts wandered to the broader implications of the encounter. Racial profiling, abuse of authority, and prejudice were not abstract concepts. They were real forces that shaped everyday experiences. This personal encounter was a stark example, a moment where systemic issues intersected with individual actions. The fear and anger that arose were understandable, but the prosecutor knew that acting impulsively would only worsen the situation. Patience, clarity, and strategic thinking were paramount. Bystanders lingered at a distance, uncertain of how to react. Their presence added another layer of complexity, a subtle pressure that reminded the prosecutor of the public gaze and the importance of measured action. Every decision now had consequences, not just for themselves and the officer, but for the community observing this unexpected drama. The stakes were high, yet the prosecutor remained grounded, drawing on years of experience navigating tense situations where outcomes depended on composure and awareness. The officer's body language shifted slightly, the rigidity of aggression giving way to subtle hesitation. The prosecutor noticed the change, interpreting it as an opening. Carefully, they formulated the words that would reveal their identity, a strategic disclosure designed to assert authority and demand respect without provoking panic. Timing and tone were everything. The wrong delivery could undo all the careful observation and restraint that had kept them safe thus far. In their mind, the prosecutor rehearsed the revelation, imagining the officer's reaction, considering the possible responses. They drew on professional experience, recalling moments in court where a well-timed statement could shift perception, command attention, and change the course of events. Now outside the courtroom and facing immediate danger, those skills were being tested in their most personal and intense form. The stakes were higher than any legal case, and the consequences were deeply real. The air between the car and the officer was thick with tension, every second stretching long and heavy. The prosecutor's heart pounded. Yet externally they remained calm, an island of composure in a sea of uncertainty. The officer's assumptions continued, revealing a lack of awareness that would soon be pivotal. The prosecutor knew that understanding the officer's mindset was key, that perception often dictated behavior, and that controlling the narrative could save lives. Memories of mentors and colleagues surfaced, recalling lessons about authority, respect, and the importance of clarity under pressure. These teachings now guided every thought, shaping the way the prosecutor would respond. There was no room for hesitation, no space for emotional reaction. Each decision had to be deliberate, calculated, and grounded in both legal authority and human understanding. Survival depended not only on physical safety, but on mastering the psychological and emotional landscape of the confrontation. The moment arrived. With a measured breath and a steady voice, the prosecutor prepared to speak, choosing words that would reveal their identity while maintaining calm authority. The officer, still unaware, remained tense and defensive. The prosecutor's internal resolve solidified. This was a moment to assert dignity, demand respect, and shift the balance of power without escalating violence. Every instinct honed over years of professional experience now converged in this single, critical action. This part of the encounter, though invisible to the wider world, was a turning point. The tension, the fear, the anticipation, all combined to create a high-stakes scenario where intellect, composure, and courage were the only tools available. The officer's ignorance of the prosecutor's true identity created a fragile equilibrium, one that could tip toward disaster or resolution depending on the next steps. The prosecutor understood the gravity, yet remained unshaken, a testament to the resilience and skill developed over a lifetime dedicated to justice. As the revelation approached, the prosecutor's mind briefly reflected on the personal significance of the moment. Years of effort, study, and dedication had built a career defined by authority, ethics, and service. Now, in a quiet street at dusk, that authority would be tested in the most direct and personal way. The outcome was uncertain, but the principles that had guided their life, composure, intelligence, and strategic thinking, remained steadfast. With careful breath and steady resolve, they prepared to bridge the gap between danger and resolution, ready to transform fear into an assertion of identity and power. The moment of revelation was delicate and charged with tension. The prosecutor, with careful precision, spoke in a calm and measured tone, letting the words carry the weight of authority and experience. "I am a prosecutor," they said, watching the officer's face carefully. The change was instantaneous. The officer's eyes widened and the rigid stance that had radiated hostility and prejudice faltered. In that instant, the balance of power shifted, but the danger had not disappeared. Every gesture, every subtle movement, was still critical. The officer's initial reaction was shock, a mixture of disbelief and sudden awareness that he had misjudged the situation entirely. His weapon lowered slightly, though he remained tense, caught between the training that demanded control and the sudden reality of his mistake. The prosecutor's calm presence became a stabilizing force, a silent command for careful thought and compliance. In that moment, the street itself seemed to hold its breath, witnessing a human drama that was as much about courage and identity as it was about authority. Inside the car, the prosecutor's heart continued to beat rapidly, yet their exterior remained composed. The realization that their position could now influence the outcome gave a sense of controlled power. They knew that authority did not come from fear or intimidation alone, but from knowledge, strategy, and the ability to assert oneself without provoking escalation. Every instinct honed over years in courtrooms, negotiating with witnesses, confronting criminals, and facing tense situations now became invaluable. The officer's voice, when it came, was hesitant, betraying uncertainty and the sudden collapse of the assumptions that had fueled his earlier aggression. The prosecutor listened carefully, noting the subtle shifts in tone and demeanor. Every hesitation, every pause, offered insight into the officer's state of mind. This was no longer just about survival. It had become a negotiation of respect, authority, and understanding. The prosecutor's calm yet firm presence communicated control without confrontation. Flashbacks surged in the prosecutor's mind, recalling times when evidence, logic, and patience had won cases, changed outcomes, and upheld justice. These experiences reinforced the understanding that measured, deliberate action was more powerful than immediate reaction. The revelation of their identity was the first step in transforming the confrontation, turning fear and aggression into an opportunity for control and resolution. The officer's eyes shifted repeatedly, trying to process what had just been revealed. There was a quiet tension, a struggle between professional pride and the sudden awareness of error. The prosecutor noted these subtle cues carefully, knowing that patience and observation could guide the next steps. Silence sometimes was a tool as strong as words. By maintaining calm and watching the officer's reactions, the prosecutor could gauge the potential for safe resolution. Thoughts of past cases, courtroom experiences, and professional challenges surfaced in the prosecutor's mind. The lessons learned in those contexts, observation, patience, strategic use of authority, and understanding human behavior, were proving invaluable. The encounter on the street mirrored courtroom dynamics in some ways, where composure, evidence, and clear communication determined outcomes. The prosecutor applied these lessons seamlessly, adapting to the immediate, high-stakes reality of personal danger. The officer's voice grew quieter, reflecting the internal acknowledgement of misjudgment. The prosecutor continued to speak calmly, guiding the behavior with clarity and authority. There was no threat, only the assertion of legal knowledge and moral expectation. The shift in dynamics highlighted the transformative power of calm, measured presence in diffusing fear and prejudice. Every subtle action reinforced the importance of strategic communication and controlled response. The street remained quiet, the distant sounds of evening providing a backdrop to the unfolding interaction. The officer's body language indicated compliance, though slight hesitation still lingered. The prosecutor maintained focus, ensuring that every movement reinforced safety and authority. The gradual de-escalation was a testament to the power of patience, observation, and thoughtful action in high-pressure situations. Internally, the prosecutor considered the broader implications of the encounter. Racial profiling, prejudice, and abuse of authority were systemic issues, yet immediate survival depended on practical strategies and composed response. By using calm authority and strategic communication, the prosecutor had created a controlled environment, shifting the dynamic from threat to safety. The encounter underscored the importance of knowledge, presence, and patience in confronting danger and injustice. As the tension eased, the prosecutor prepared for the final steps to ensure complete resolution. Documenting the interaction, preserving evidence, and guiding the officer to fully comply with procedural expectations were all essential. The encounter, though dangerous, had been transformed into an opportunity to assert authority, maintain dignity, and establish accountability. Every decision, every word, and every gesture contributed to the safe and responsible management of the situation. The officer, now visibly aware of error and compliance, began to regain composure. The prosecutor's calm guidance ensured that the threat of aggression was minimized, while reinforcing the importance of professional conduct. Bystanders, silently observing, witnessed the transformation of a potentially fatal encounter into a controlled and safe resolution. The scene highlighted the impact of composed authority, strategic communication, and patient observation in managing human behavior under extreme pressure. The final moments of the encounter emphasized the prosecutor's careful orchestration of authority and presence. By maintaining composure, using strategic communication, and applying professional knowledge, the prosecutor ensured personal safety while guiding the officer toward acknowledgement and compliance. The street, once charged with tension and fear, now reflected a fragile equilibrium, a testament to the power of intelligence, patience, and human-centered strategy in confronting danger and injustice. The aftermath of the encounter carried a weight that went beyond the immediate relief of safety. The officer, now fully compliant and visibly aware of the seriousness of his actions, slowly stepped back, lowering his hands completely. The prosecutor remained seated in the car observing, ensuring that every movement from the officer was deliberate and without further threat. The quiet street, once a stage of danger, had transformed into a place of reflection, accountability, and awareness. The prosecutor's mind raced with the steps that needed to follow. Documentation was critical. Every word, gesture, and decision from the officer would need to be recorded to ensure accountability. The legal mind, honed over years of handling evidence in cases, now applied itself to preserving a clear record of the event. Phone in hand, the prosecutor carefully documented what had occurred, making mental notes of times, words spoken, and actions taken. This was not just for personal protection, but to ensure that justice could be pursued and systemic issues addressed. The officer, meanwhile, stood silently, the weight of understanding pressing on his shoulders. There was no excuse for his previous behavior, and the realization of error was evident in his posture and hesitant speech. The prosecutor chose words carefully, calm yet firm, reinforcing the need for proper conduct and accountability. The encounter was no longer about confrontation. It was about responsibility, recognition of wrongdoing, and ensuring that no further escalation occurred. Every interaction now had to balance authority, safety, and the opportunity for education. The prosecutor also considered the broader impact of the situation. Racial prejudice, bias, and the misuse of authority were not isolated incidents. This encounter, though deeply personal, reflected systemic problems that affected many. While the immediate priority was personal safety, the larger goal involved ensuring that this moment contributed to accountability and awareness. The careful recording and calm communication were both practical and symbolic actions, demonstrating the power of composure, knowledge, and strategy. As the minutes passed, the officer slowly began to acknowledge the gravity of the encounter. Words were chosen with caution, an attempt to explain without justification. The prosecutor listened, maintaining control of the interaction, guiding the conversation to ensure that responsibility was accepted and future conduct aligned with proper procedures. The atmosphere, once tense with fear and aggression, shifted toward a cautious understanding, a fragile but necessary step toward resolution. The prosecutor's thoughts wandered briefly to the countless times in the past when similar biases had influenced decisions, often with less oversight and fewer safeguards. This moment, while intense, demonstrated the importance of preparedness, knowledge, and composure in facing threats that stemmed from prejudice. It also reinforced the ongoing need for systemic change, accountability, and education. Yet, in that quiet moment on the street, the focus remained on ensuring that this particular situation reached a safe and responsible conclusion. Bystanders, still observing at a distance, reflected the social weight of the encounter. Though silent, their presence underscored the importance of authority, composure, and accountability. The prosecutor remained aware of this unspoken audience, understanding that their behavior and decisions were being witnessed. The demonstration of controlled authority, clear communication, and careful observation highlighted the potential for influence without aggression, modeling a path toward responsible resolution. The officer, now fully aware of the implications of his actions, took deliberate steps to ensure that further escalation was impossible. Compliance was evident in his gestures, posture, and tone of voice. The prosecutor continued to guide the interaction, emphasizing clear expectations, professional behavior, and adherence to procedure. The street, quiet in its evening stillness, had become a setting for the transformation of fear into responsibility, aggression into awareness, and danger into structured resolution. The prosecutor considered the next steps outside of the immediate encounter: filing a formal report, submitting evidence of the officer's behavior, and ensuring that proper channels addressed the misconduct were all necessary. The experience, though personal and frightening, also highlighted the power of professionalism and knowledge in confronting systemic issues. The careful combination of calm authority, strategic communication, and legal expertise had turned a potentially fatal situation into a controlled demonstration of justice and composure. As the encounter concluded, the prosecutor slowly began to exit the vehicle, maintaining awareness of the officer's actions. Every movement was deliberate, measured, and controlled. The officer remained compliant, a visible acknowledgement of error and the shift in authority that had occurred. The street, once tense and threatening, now reflected a fragile peace, shaped by careful observation, patience, and the assertion of professional knowledge. Reflecting on the encounter, the prosecutor recognized the lessons embedded in the experience: human behavior under stress, the power of calm authority, and the importance of clear communication were all reaffirmed. While systemic issues such as racial prejudice and abuse of power were far from resolved, this incident demonstrated that knowledge, composure, and strategic action could transform danger into an opportunity for accountability and education. The prosecutor also reflected on the personal emotions stirred by the incident. Fear, anger, frustration, and relief intermingled, creating a complex emotional landscape. Yet the ability to maintain composure, act strategically, and assert authority without resorting to aggression reinforced both personal resilience and professional strength. The experience, though harrowing, became a testament to the enduring importance of preparation, patience, and intelligence in confronting prejudice and danger. The officer, now fully aware of the gravity of his actions, began to respond with more openness. Apologies were offered, tentative yet sincere. The prosecutor acknowledged the words without engaging in argument, maintaining a focus on accountability, procedure, and professional responsibility. This delicate balance ensured that the interaction concluded safely, while reinforcing the lessons of respect, awareness, and the consequences of prejudice. As the evening settled into quiet, the prosecutor prepared to leave the scene, ensuring that all documentation was complete and evidence preserved. The street, once marked by tension and fear, had become a space of resolution, reflection, and accountability. The encounter had transformed, illustrating the power of composed authority, strategic communication, and the application of knowledge in guiding human behavior and confronting systemic issues. Walking away from the car, the prosecutor considered the broader impact of the event. While the immediate danger had passed, the experience underscored the ongoing need for vigilance, accountability, and systemic change. It also highlighted the importance of personal resilience, professional knowledge, and strategic action in turning moments of fear into opportunities for justice and awareness. The encounter would remain a defining moment, a story of survival, composure, and the assertion of authority against prejudice and aggression. In the end, the prosecutor left the street not just as someone who had survived a dangerous encounter, but as someone who had transformed it. Through calm presence, careful observation, and strategic use of authority, a potentially life-threatening situation became an example of controlled resolution, accountability, and human dignity. The lessons were clear. Knowledge, patience, and composure could confront fear, transform aggression, and uphold justice, even in the most immediate and personal of circumstances. The experience would remain a powerful reminder of the strength of character, professionalism, and the human ability to navigate danger with intelligence and courage.